Welcome to Vermont Artists and Authors, where we interview great storytellers and artists from the amazing Green Mountain State. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com. We're excited to have with us the internationally renowned and award-winning author, Jim DeFilippi.
Oh, wow. Good pronunciation. Thank you, Barney. Well,
we practiced. See, there you go. So Jim, before we start, I mentioned before we were exchanging emails that a friend of our show here, the Joseph Citro, who's been on a few times, was always mentioning Jim DeFilippi about some of his inspirations were from you, some of his book inspirations were from you, and he said that by far, he says he said, Barney, you have to get Jim on your show. He's got plenty of stories to tell, and he's a favorite. They say he's an author's author, and that you have and you have a veritable. And if you go to brownfedorabooks.com, you have a entire library of the books that you've written, plus along with some of your friends that you've kind of helped out with as well. So I guess we just want to kind of jump right into it, Jim, and ask. So like I say, you write humor and you write crime novels, correct?
everything, Barney. First, I have to pay tribute to Joe Citro. He's a wonderful guy and a wonderful friend, and he's been a big help to me through my career. But yeah, my career is funny, right? I tell people basically I started at the top and worked my way down. Back in the 90s, I had a crime novel with HarperCollins, paid me good money, sold well. But since then, it's been all downhill. Although I've been enjoying myself. If I had a bestseller with that first crime novel, it was called Blood Sugar. I'd still
Mm.
series right now. I'd be on my 24th or 25th book on the detective's name was Joe Luna. And there's nothing wrong with that. A fellow Vermonter that we both know called Archer Mayer does that and has been doing it for years and doing it magnificently. But when my well sort of dried up, it freed me to do any kind of genre. And I love all sorts of dramas. If I may, let me read you the back of my last book, which is called Tough Guys Don't Eat Muzzle. But it says this book is true crime, biography, American history, social commentary, criminology, psychology, sociology, memoir, humor, a pinch of failed poetry, and creative nonfiction. And it really is. Let me show you the cover there. I just, my mind goes all over the place. And it's just wonderful being an independent publisher and an author that you can just attack any genre you want. Right now, I've just started doing a whodunit for the simple reason that I've never written a whodunit before, and all the rules are different, and all of the tone is different. But I'm enjoying myself. I'm loving it. Whenever I try out a different genre, I seem to enjoy myself.
Well, because you did mention Blood Sugar, so your character in that, Jola Luna, faces some morally ambiguous situations.
Yeah.
So, what draws you to writing characters that are complex and often flawed?
Well, when it comes to crime noveling, Barney, or crime novel writing, Barney, my two inspirations are two guys you might have heard of. One is named Elmore Leonard, who was a brilliant crime novelist, and the second was a fellow who lived close here in Boston, a fellow named George V. Higgins, and he wrote what some people consider the greatest American crime novel of all time. It was called The Friends of Eddie Coyle. And the thing I got out of those guys is the plot's fine and plot's important and, catching the bad guy and having the exciting climax. But there's nothing like stunning dialogue and stunning scenery. And that's what I really shot for with Joe Luna and Blood Sugar. And with all of my books, as a matter of fact, the dialogue is so much more important than anything to me. As a matter of fact, getting back to our mutual friend Joe Citro, it took me about 10 years to get Blood Sugar published. And when I did, and I got that nice royalty check, I said to Joe Citro, Joe, they told me this one has a good plot. Why didn't you tell me all along that a book needed a plot? Just kind of being. And Joe, with his best Oliver Hardy tone of voice, said, Jim, you never would have believed me anyhow. Like he was talking to Dan Laurel or something, you know. But yeah, but that's how it goes with me. And then with humor, I also write a lot of humor books. My God is a guy named P.G. Woodhouse, who writes the Jeeves Bertie Wooster series, and I'll reread his books 5, 10 times and laugh out loud every time. He's just wonderful. So if I leave your listeners with anything, let me say those are three authors that are brilliant: uh, Elmore Leonard, George V. Higgins, and P.G. Woodhouse.
Because you did mention, yeah, as a humor writer, how do you balance kind of like the dark and the serious elements of crime fiction with comedic undertones? You do that very well.
Yeah, that's a little tricky, but I do that probably in every one of my books. Uh, I'll draw this metaphor for you, Barney. You're a Vermonter, so you know on those old Vermont roads, they've repaved them so many times that the front or the middle of the road is higher than the edges, and you're constantly fighting the wheel to stay in your lane and not go off into a ditch. Well, when I'm writing crime, serious crime, that's what I'm doing with humor. I'm constantly seeing the jokes and the humorous potential, and I'm always kind of being dragged off into the sidewalk. And I do my best to stay on the straight and narrow and keep the jokes on a minimum, but I don't always do that. Uh, Again, talking about my last book, Tough Guys Don't Eat Muzzle, it's a very serious book. It's about a true gangster, an Al Capone hitman named Frenchy LaRue. And the whole book is serious, but I just couldn't resist ending it with a joke. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read the last paragraph of the book for you. The comedian Jackie Vernon told this story. A man once predicted that the world would end on February 5th, 1949. And for him, it did. He was at the automat and he stuck his head inside the little box to eat a piece of pie. The glass door slammed shut and snapped the back of his neck. Now, I don't know what an automat is. You're a Vermonter, not a New York City guy. But the picture that involves made me laugh, and I just couldn't resist it. My writing groups all said, no, you can't end with a joke. It's a serious book, Jim. But you know, another thing about being an indie writer, you do what you want to do. You say what you want. Nobody's bossing you around. So I'm loving it. I'm enjoying myself.
Well, you mentioned Blood Sugar, but also Duck Alley is another book you're well known for, as too.
Probably my most beloved book, not by me, but by my reading public, such as they were. Duck Alley is a little neighborhood on Long Island, outside of New York City, where I grew up. And a friend of mine and I did a lot of crazy things, a lot of stunts as kids will do. And I wanted to write a story about that, but I knew that wouldn't sell. This was back in the days when I was trying to interest commercial publishers in my work. So what I did is I fleshed out a fictionalized crime story about two friends who get in trouble with the law and they have to turn on each other. And I just used that plot as sort of a clothesline. And then I hung the different little adventures that these two guys had on that clothesline. And they were real adventures that my friend Al and I had. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's really what happened. One of our favorite gags was I would get into the trunk of his old 53 Plymouth and he would be driving and he would drive very slow so that a car would almost be tailgating us. And then I would gently lift the trunk up and I'd be sitting there on a little stool in Al's trunk eating a sandwich, and he would pull over. Guy would be watching us the whole time. John would get out, or Al would get out, slam the trunk closed on me, and then just drive away. So I'm sure that fellow behind us went home that night and said, I can't believe what I just saw, and would describe the scene. But we did a lot of goofy things like that. So I put a bunch of those stories together with a very serious crime story. And yeah, that Duck Alley, it's a good book.
So were you the inspiration for Jay Tasty or Albert Nikozak?
I forget the names of the two characters, but I was the straight one. I was the school teacher, and Al was yeah, that's it. Al was Nikolazak, and he was the guy who got into trouble, and they wind up, turning on each other, and it's a traumatic, sad ending where the two guys go. I've got some really nice quotes about that. That fella George V. Higgins, who I told you wrote The Friends of Eddie Coyle. One of the highlights of my career was he gave me a blurb on it. He said it was a phenomenal book. He compared it to a book called A Separate Piece. He said it was a separate piece and blue collar. And I felt really good about that. Getting a blurb from George V. Higgins was something because he wasn't a guy who suffered fools kindly. If he didn't like, he was going to have nothing to do with it. So I could tell he wasn't just blowing smoke. He was true. But yeah, I enjoyed writing uh, Duck Alley. And as I say, a lot of people still consider that my favorite book. And the other one that people seem to like was called The Mules of Monte Cassino. About 15 years ago, my wife and I took a tour of Italy, and we went to see the Monte Cassino, which was a scene of a battle there, and a monastery was bombed out. It was a horrible, horrible battle. The reason we hear about D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge, and we don't hear about Monte Cassino, is the Americans were not the heroes. We won that battle, but we didn't act nobly at all. As a matter of fact, it sounds horrible to say, but the true heroes of Monte Cassino were the German soldiers. They were in this, yeah, there it is. Thank you for putting it up. They were in that monastery that you can see at the top of the hill through a winter, and they were bombed and shattered and shot, and they just hung on. They were like Davy Crockett at the Alamo. And finally we managed to overrun them and go further north. But we had destroyed many civilian lives. We had destroyed great works of art. We basically destroyed our morality. So it's not a famous battle, and it's not a battle to be proud of, but it's certainly a battle that we should know about. So yeah, if you want to read a war story, I was going to call it a war novel, but it's not a novel; it's history. Read The Mules of Monte Cassino. Thank you for flashing it up there. I appreciate that, Barney.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. Thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. It kind of does touch on my next question for you, because your novels do often explore the gray areas of morality. So what draws you into these ambiguous situations, and why you like to write about
Yeah, I just like to be surprised when I'm
them?
reading a book, whether it's a crime book or anything else. When I'm watching a movie, I'm always amazed at how few times I'm surprised. I mean, you'll go see a movie and there'll be a serial killer, and then it'll cut to scenes of the cop home with his wife having breakfast and the kids. And at the end of that movie, the serial killer's going to bust into the house and threaten the wife, and then the hero's going to take him down. And it's the same thing with everything. You read editorials in very good newspapers, and by the first sentence, you know what the rest of the essay is going to be. I mean, taking both sides of abortion, you can read the first sentence of any abortion editorial, and you know where the rest of it's going. So I get bored pretty easily. I get bored with like that. I get bored with books like that. So I try to avoid that. I try to shock and surprise people as much as possible. And I enjoy that. I think that's the way to do it. That's the way. I'm not saying I'm a good writer, but that's the way the good writers do it. Certainly the way the great writers do it.
Well, because so looking back on your writing career so far, how would you say you've evolved as an author when you think about your first books to your latest ones?
I think I started out just wanting to be a crime novelist, and my first two, three, four were crime novels. And I'm not even sure what got me off that track. Maybe it was the humor, or maybe it was the biography. I don't know, but I think I've evolved. I really think I'm an eccentric, but certainly prolific writer. I've published. I'm working on my 44th book now. I don't know if you a folk singer named Tom Rush, wonderful folk singer, terrifically talented guy. But I was lucky enough to get an email from him the other day, saying how impressed he was by how prolific I am, and it's true. I may be nothing else, but I write fast and I write prolific. I mean, I can. One year I put out 5 books. You know, I just keep going. I drive my writing group crazy because they'll be doing it the right way. They'll be working on a book for years to get it right, and they'll kind of look at me as a 2 week wonder. They're always joking that your next book, Jim, will be out in 2 weeks. We can't wait for it. But that's just the way I work. The mind is always going, and I'm not saying I don't dress up the books. I do some serious proofreading and editing and rewriting, but I just work fast. If nothing else, I'm fast. And now what's making me faster is for years I was paying a proofreader a few bucks, a fellow Vermonter named Jeff Hewitt, Fuzzy Hewitt, to proofread my books, and he was amazing. Yeah, if there was a quotation mark that was in italics instead of regular print, he would find it, and you can barely see it when you stare at it. So he was wonderful. But I hate to say it, my last book, I went to AI. I went to artificial intelligence, a thing called Grammarly, and it was amazing. It was faster than Hewitt. It was cheaper. It was free, as a matter of fact. So there, we're getting back to that idea that technology can be a bear and it can be a curse, but used right, boy, can it be great. I don't know if you have any experience with AI or if you use anything in it, but it's amazing.
Yeah. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about your 100 memoirs in 100 words. What was that inspiration from?
Uh, a friend of mine down in Salem has a website called 5 Minute Lit, and she gets some amazing things. The rules are simple. You have to have it has to be a true story. It has to be about 5 minutes in your life. It can't be over the course of the years, and it has to be exactly 100 words. 101 doesn't count. 99 doesn't count. So I wrote one, and she enjoyed it and published it. I wrote another. She enjoyed it and published it. Actually, not just her, but she has a series of readers for 5 Minute Lit. And I said, wait a minute, I could do, I could do a whole book like this. I could do 100 of these. 100 times 100 is 10,000, which is a fairly short book. But boy, I had fun writing that. I divided it into the 4 or 5 places I've lived in my life, growing up on Duck Alley, getting drafted and going to Alaska during the Vietnam conflict, then moving to Vermont and teaching school up there for 30 years, and then moving down here to Salem. So there's 4 sections in the book. Every chapter is exactly 100 words. They're all absolutely true, and they all have no more than 5 minutes covered. So yeah, I'm proud of that book. I like that. And there I am on the cover. You're great at pulling up these covers. In good weather, I go up to my smoking platform. You see it there on the cover with my cigar. And every Friday afternoon, I light up a cigar and sit there and take notes on a book. And it's the most enjoyable time of my summer. I've just closed up the smoking platform because my wife won't let me smoke inside. and it's too cold to smoke outside. So I'll be smoking no cigars until next April, and then I'll break open a new cigar and be happy.
What can you tell us about any of your upcoming projects?
Well, I think I mentioned, I don't know if it was off air or not, but I've decided to try a whodunit. And
Okay.
for the simple reason I've never done one before. I've written history. Well, I've already told you the different kind of books I've read. Never tried a whodunit. Not even read many of them. I used to, for a time being, I was reading a lot of Agatha Christie, but this was years ago. And she was amazing because 3 chapters before the ending, you knew who did it. And then 2 chapters before the ending, it was somebody else, and you knew that was the culprit. And then in the last chapter, you knew it was someone else. And then on the last page of the last chapter, you got the full story. So I said, "Wow, I wonder if I could do something like that." So that's what I'm now. It's a whodunit. Its current title is called the uh, the Champagne Undertow. And what I wanted something that's talk about wealth, champagne for an upper class drink. But the undertow is the idea that wealth has a tendency to pull you under and destroy you, and that's what's happening to the people in this book. Uh, they're isolated on an island full of millionaires, and there's a either a murder or a suicide or an accidental death, and then you think one guy's done it, think the other guy's done it. I've got the whole book mapped out. I always tend to map out my books chapter by chapter before I ever start. What I'm working on now, though, is the transitions. When one suspect is shown to be innocent, I have to kind of subtly get on to the next suspect. So I'm having a little trouble with that, but I'm enjoying myself. But anyway, that's what I'm working on now. I told you before that I work fast, but this one's going to take a little more time than most because it's so unfamiliar territory to me. So I don't know. Maybe in the spring, this will probably be my winter writing project, and the Champlain Undertow. Or I sometimes think have different names for it. But anyway, that'll probably be out in the spring. That's my current project.
So my last question for you is: what advice would you give aspiring authors and writers that are interested in blending like crime and humor?
That's easy. It's the same two advice I've given my students for 30 years, and I give everybody whenever they ask for any kind of advice. 2 words: enjoy yourself. Just whatever you're doing, just enjoy it. And I don't mean, you have to go out and get drunk and get high. I mean, just enjoy who you are, know what your talents are, know what you like doing, and just do that. If you like writing humor, then write funny books, and don't worry if they're going to sell or people aren't going to laugh. If you like crime fiction, just do that. Just enjoy yourself. Uh, I never thought I was going to be a writer, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I picked up a book by a guy named Mickey Spillane, a tough, hard-nosed uh, mystery writer, and it was a book called The Girl Hunters. And the first sentence was, "They found me in the gutter." And I read that sentence. And said, wow, that's cool. I wonder if I could write like that. I wonder if I would enjoy myself. And so years later, I went back to crime writing fiction. And yeah, that's what I do. So my advice is enjoy yourself.
So Jim, if people want to learn more about you and your work, where is the best place they could go to?
You can go to the Brown Fedora books, but I prefer they go right to Amazon. Go to amazon.com/author and then slash my name, Jim DeFilippi. Or actually, just go to anywhere in Amazon books and just punch in my name and you'll see it. The other great thing about indie publishing is the books stay in print. All 43, soon to be 44 books that I've written over the years are still in print. If I was making $1 million from HarperCollins or one of the big publishing houses, they'd put out the hardcover one year, they'd put out a paperback version the next year, and the third year the book would be gone, unable to find out in print.
Mm.
But some of my books are there. So please go to amazon.com /author Jim DeFilippi. This has been great talking to you, Barney. I'm really enjoying my.
Yeah. So listen, so Jim, you're gonna have to come back on when you have your Champagne Undertow coming.
Oh yeah, sure. That sounds fine. I got your email address now, and I'll do that. Okay.